Park and Grove, formerly known as the Park Cafe at the corner of Grove and Rutledge, now serves new American cuisine for lunch and dinner, and of course, weekend brunch. Today, I talk with the owner of Park and Grove, Karalee Nielsen Fallert, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Karalee Nielsen Fallert, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Obviously, you're the owner of Park and Grove, which formerly was obviously the Park Cafe there at Grove and Rutledge Avenue in downtown Charleston. And I know that you all recently opened. Who is Karalee these days?
Karalee is finding her new flow after a pandemic, owning restaurants for sure. I find myself finding a new, stasis, as it were, after kind of all of the instability and insecurity of the last 18 months. But I would say I'm stronger than I was before, and I'm more resilient than I was before. And I would say, as of basically having gone through the toughest year of my entire life, I'm optimistic about what the future holds.
And obviously, you're strong and resilient, as you said. What is that flow right now?
I think it's really getting back to a place of not just expecting there to be a crisis every day. I found myself the other day just kind of waiting for another shoe to drop that I didn't even think was going to. It was like I had no reason to believe that. But I think a lot of people in the hospitality industry and other industries that were affected extraordinarily by the pandemic, there was just every single day there was a new disaster, and so I think our systems really got wired to that constant stress and at a very high level, and that problem solving that comes with it. And so I think it's just really kind of keying ourselves down. At least it feels like to me, like just recalibrating what my expectations are on a cellular level about what the day is supposed to hold.
Yes, indeed. And we're slowly trying to come out of this pandemic. What are the systems right now?
For us, it's the one thing that I think has been helpful is early on the information just changed constantly, right? You never knew really where the next day or the next week was going to take us. And so as an organization, we've been able to, for example, a couple months ago, we saw that our team members started getting sick again. And it seemed like when the Delta variant came to the United States, we didn't wait. We didn't wait to be told, hey, it's a good idea to put masks back on. I wanted to make sure we could keep our restaurants open and to keep our employees and our customers safe. So we voluntarily mandated masks for our employees, and we set some metrics based on risk levels in our county and in our community, and just told our teams, listen, we know from what we were reading, the science and from the experts, that if we ask you to wear a mask in the public setting that you work in, that we'll be able to keep each other safer longer. And obviously, I can't tell you what to do outside of work, but I can ask that you use these best health practices right now in order for us to keep our businesses open. And I'm really glad that we did that. And so I think what we are doing is taking some of the certainties that we learned from last year, and instead of waiting for local leadership or whatever, to tell us how to manage this pandemic, we're now in a place where we feel comfortable getting ahead of it. And I think just learning those lessons of last year, what could possibly happen, what happens when enough of your team is sick that you can't open the doors, or people have to go home and don't work for 2 weeks, and all those things that are really just dire now. They're not things we want to face again. So how do we get ahead of those, and how do we manage the pandemic in our four walls?
And what metrics are you looking at right now, Karalee?
So right now we use a current map that's published by the CDC and it basically says what level of risk for spreading the virus around right now. And according to that, Charleston County is at extremely high risk. So we told our teams, as long as we're in that extremely high risk category for the county or designation, we'll keep our masks on. Once it comes down to either a moderate or mild risk, that's when we'll take the masks off. And I'm really glad that we have those resources to go to. because it's not arbitrary. It's not just like, how am I feeling about the pandemic, or am I tired of wearing my mask 10 hours a day? Yes, I'm tired of wearing my mask 10 hours a day, but I don't, that doesn't play into our decision. It plays into just the data and the facts about what we're doing. And I think that's been very helpful for our teams too. And thankfully we haven't had any problems. We got ahead of it. We didn't have to, we have a trickle, occasionally somebody gets sick, but we work on that really quickly. And I'm just really glad that we've done that.
Speaking of decisions, what got you from the Park Cafe to now Park and Grove?
Well, I think a lot of things happened in the pandemic. To me, I would say was the great clarifier for a lot of things, right? With that much pressure on organizations and communities and groups, you get to see what's weak about an organization, and you get to see where the opportunities are also on both sides of that. And for us, what we saw at Park and Cafe was that for a long time we had been just breakfast, lunch, and brunch, and that was because the market dictated for a long time that that's what our neighbors wanted up there, for the most part. And then during the pandemic, we transitioned to offering dinner because that's one of the things that our neighbors wanted, because many restaurants closed down. We did not close down at the Park Cafe. We did have a few weeks where we took a much needed break for our teams, but overall we stayed in there trying to serve our community. And with that, it clearly became obvious to us that we really needed to bring dinner back to that corner of Park or Rutledge and Grove, but we didn't want to do it under the guise of a team that was really transformed, and most of our leadership had changed during the pandemic too. So it was really important for our new leadership, Chef Ramon Taimanglo and our general manager Samson Kahansky, that we were able to bring our collective full creative force to this new idea around dinner. And as we did that, we realized we can't really call it a cafe anymore. We're not going to be open for breakfast. We're not going to be focusing on this day brightness that you think of when you talk, say, a cafe. And so once we gave ourselves permission to change the name, it was really Pandora's box. It was just like, well, what else could we do? And so that really was the impetus to just. And we wouldn't say, we say that we keep the heritage of our former selves, because there are things that we've kept, like the avocado toast and the fried egg sandwich. But for the most part, it has been more of like a growing up or a maturing of the brand, might be the better way to say it.
Okay. What are your weaknesses, Karalee, and what are your opportunities?
Well, I think before, as it relates, you or me personally, or the brand?
Oh, the brand. Okay.
I was going to say that's
I like you. And I know you're strong.
Yeah. I think for us, it was basically, it's all about teams. And so our team at the time that we had was probably not the right team, ultimately, at the end of the day, to take us where we wanted to go, albeit from experience, desire, burnout. Ultimately we had to find ourselves and recalibrate our team, because our business is all about the people who work in it.
Yes, indeed.
And so on the flip side of that, with a new team, the opportunities as we see it are endless, and that's a very exciting and a motivating place to be.
You talked about earlier about obviously the market wanting at that time a cafe where people in that community wanted, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What is the current market analysis right now?
It's hard to say. We did lose a handful of businesses in our community, but Charleston is an extraordinary place, and I'm kind of always pinching myself, wondering how this stops. But with the growth every time a new restaurant opens in our Charleston, I'm like, how are we going to support this volume? And yet, all of us, it seems like, and a very generalization, when I talk to my peers who own restaurant groups, everyone's sales are growing. Everybody's businesses are growing, as long as we're all doing the right things within our businesses, right? As long as we're not being the hindering factor there. And so to me, it seems like Charleston's in a really great place. And despite what feels like, what would make sense, it does seem like we're continuing to grow, and we're able to put new guests in those seats and bring the old ones back. And so it's an extraordinary time in Charleston. And I think that we're very, very fortunate here to have been able to grow and not retract too much through the pandemic, ultimately.
Okay. How do you keep up with that growth with smart growth?
It's all about people. I think for us, it's all about attracting and retaining the right talent. And there's a lot of people moving to Charleston from off, as we used to say, but like ultimately, we have new people from Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Ohio, Kentucky. We have people who've moved here from all over the United States, and I don't think that's a trend that's going to stop. So what we're committed to is just having a very high standard for how we operate our businesses, and knowing the kinds of folks that will thrive in that environment, and then being able to do our best to train and educate people to grow themselves while they're with us. And in that, once we have the right team, and then we can expand. I think the kiss of death ultimately in our business is diluting your best people out for the sake of growth without a solid pipeline behind them.
Yes, indeed. And I know Park and Grove obviously is a much loved neighborhood. Jim's just stepped from historic Hampton Park in downtown Charleston, as you know. What is the quality of life in that neighborhood right now?
I would say it's pretty good. I think it's nice because it's still a pedestrian neighborhood. It's almost like it is in Charleston, but it's more of a suburban version of Charleston, and it's changing. There are a lot of businesses opening up in specific spots in the neighborhood, but I think it's a really great place to call home right now. And we're very lucky to have a very loyal customer base, people who can just walk, ride their bike, or we're seeing a lot of golf carts these days.
Oh yes.
Right. So we're seeing a lot of those folks, and I think they appreciate not having to leave their neighborhood to have the kind of experience they can at Park and Grove.
And like its dynamic neighborhood, Park and Grove moves with the seasons according to the local media. How are you moving with the fall season, which obviously began today?
Well, we're sadly counting every tomato that's in our store right now, and every peach that is left, because we just love summer so much. But we had a meeting yesterday, and Chef Ramon said he said, we can't promote that we'll have a peach or a tomato by Friday. So internally, we're really savoring those. And we have an interesting transition month, and without boring you with the details of South Carolina agriculture, but this month, in the next 4 or 5 weeks, we really rely on kind of shoulder crops, things that are available kind of more year-round, but things like broccoli and cruciferous vegetables, cauliflowers, a lot of the alliums, things like leeks and garlic and onions, and what we call the shoulder crops that are in place and are around all the time, until the beautiful kombucha squashes and the pumpkins and the things like that really don't get it into our doors from the local farmers until probably mid-October. So we're in a little bit of a focusing on whatever we can from the oceans right now as the fields and orchards transition right now. So it's a unique time, but it's great for creativity, and I think that's the beauty of what we do there, is it keeps us on our toes.
And using fresh ingredients that reflect the abundance of local fields, farms, and waters, the culinary team blends classic and inventive approaches from an unforgettable, that is, new American experience, according to the Charleston City paper. How does that new American experience meet Southern Charleston?
Well, I think it's Southern because it's what we grow here, right? And American cuisine, we called it wildly new American, wildly to obviously focus on the fact that it's fresh and local. But new American to me is reflecting and being influenced by all of the cultures that make America. Ultimately, at the end of the day, American cuisine reflects every immigrant who comes to the United States. And so that's an incredible palette to create from culinarily. And, that can be the Charleston gold rice that came here from, the African slaves who were brought here or forced to bring here. It can be everything from shishito peppers, which, come from South America. There's just, it's pulling from all over. We like to do it in a very simple fashion, and we don't put a lot of fuss behind it. We really want those ingredients and those processes and those influences to speak for themselves.
What particular culture have you actually had a time to reflect on from obviously hospitable standpoint?
I really think that as it relates to hospitality, we are fortunate in the South. There's always a two sides to everything, but we have something that is beautiful here that is not reflected in the other parts of the country. And that is that I think we genuinely like to share this experience of Charleston, and it's obviously been a good thing for our economy, but there's a magic to this place that people feel, and being able to share that through looking somebody in the eye as they walk down the street and saying hello, which is pretty uncommon, but it happens more here than anywhere else.
Yes.
Or just being able to say, welcome, come in, and let us genuinely treat you like the human being that you are, and show you inside our house, and not treat you as a dollar bill, right? Like, we want you to genuinely feel our love for what we do, because we do. As I tell my teams all the time, we're the fortunate few. Our opportunity to spread joy and share joy instantly with people is our job. And that's pretty incredible. We get to see what the fruits of our labors with our guests in the moment. And that's not very common in the workforce. And so we're very lucky to do what we do. And ultimately, I think the Southern culture helps us do that. The modern Southern culture, I'd say.
Yes, indeed. And from simple preparations of wildly delicious dishes, that is, thoughtful service, and inviting space that effortlessly moves from the sun-drenched brunches to starlit dinners to outside gathering spaces for events and activations, Park and Grove is obviously a big, huge energy according to the city paper. Does this space meet your needs, Karalee?
It does. It feels good. It feels good to me. I don't know that when you create that you ever feel finished. It's always a work in progress. Even my restaurants that are 16, 17 years old now, they feel like they always need a haircut in a way, But right now, Park and Grove does feel great. It feels good to have that vibrant new energy. And I love the delight that I get to see in people's faces or read in their messages to me with how excited they are to have experienced it. And that feels good.
And how do you actually have the energy and time to ensure the success of this new restaurant?
It's a delicate balancing act, but we have wonderful teams. Again, Quintin, I think, and you probably hear this from a lot of business owners, but it's all about the people who work together within our organization. And we have a great team that helps both every dish that goes out and every cocktail or mocktail that goes out to helping me care for my young son to, it's everything. We have all our hands around everything right now. And it's great to be leading the team that we have.
And you said this quote, restaurants are living, breathing entities that need to grow, and the pandemic helps shed light on our team's hopes and aspirations for future evolution. And this might be a redundant question, but how do you hope that Park and Grove will actually grow during this pandemic?
I'd like us to set the roots down that we need to be viable, thriving, and growing entity in 30 years. Restaurants have the ability to be institutions within communities so that several generations get to enjoy them and share the same memories together. And that's a really powerful thing to me. And it comes down to being able to create an organization like the entity that grows and cultivates new talent, new team, and so that we can make sure the heritage of those experiences and those memories continues to grow.
And what are those roots right now?
Ultimately, I think explaining who we are by what we do, right? Showing our guests who we are and making sure, again, we're just consistent. If you have a really beautiful swordfish when you come in and with a summer salad made of local beans, you want it the same way every time, and you want your server or your bartender and the host to remember your name. And those things are the special things about what we do and the magic behind the scenes of how we do it. And so it's really making sure that we do that right every time.
And you touched on this a little bit earlier, and I hate to ask this question, but what restaurants in your area are successful, and which ones, I hate to ask this, are failures?
Well, I don't, it's that a failure is kind of it couldn't be arbitrary, right? It can be all financial. It could be other things. To me, I think that the businesses that I admire the most are the ones that have maintained their level of excellence the longest. And I would say my friend Mike Lotta and his partner Adam Nemero doing a phenomenal job of at Fig and The Ordinary of really keeping a high bar for what they do and really creating an environment that trains wonderful hospitality professionals and also people who I can't even imagine how many businesses they've spawned outside of from their own walls. My friend Steve Palmer does an incredible job as well, and I'm really proud of him and the work that he's done as he's grown outside of Charleston. That's really beautiful. And I think, my friend Aaron Siegel, same thing at Home Team.
Oh, yes.
They bring such a fun and energy to everything they do. And so I think those are the businesses I would say that I look at, and I am always, as from a North Star, I'm really proud of the work they do in our community. And I think the failure side of things, Quintin, is a very personal, experience in a business. I've definitely closed businesses, and that's tough. And they closed for different reasons. So I couldn't actually say that I could point to businesses that are failing, but I ultimately know that that our industry is you can't sustain a failing restaurant very long. So it becomes evident quickly, where that happens.
Absolutely. And many, many years ago, when I was at the Charleston City Best of Charleston party, I had some of the wings from the Home Team and loved it.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, indeed. But let me ask you this, Karalee. When did you identify what you're doing right now is something that no one else was doing in the area?
That's a really interesting question, because it was a hard needle to thread, frankly. There's a lot of restaurants, a lot of great restaurants in Charleston, and I'm not a fan of bringing something to the market based on my ego. I want to bring something that I know doesn't exist, because my aforementioned peers and friends, like I said, it's like a street fight, fighting for customers from, trying to take it from one of my friends. And so I wanted to be able to create something that we knew was here to a degree, but not where we were, not in the neighborhood. We knew our neighborhood wanted more accessibility to it, but we also realized that there was an opportunity to kind of combine more of a smaller plate concept with the seasonal eatery. You see what we're doing in more of the fine dining restaurants, like I mentioned, but you don't see it in a more casual environment. And we meet kind of in between that. In the world of fine dining and casual. And so people feel comfortable coming into Park and Grove 2 or 3 times during the week. They can afford to do it. It's not in those upper echelons, but they get the same experience. And I think that's what we've created.
And obviously, according to the city paper, you can look for dinner dishes like the house-made picante with pesto and pork jowl. My pronunciation is bad, obviously. But you have so many dishes now at Park and Grove. Which one of those dishes describes you, Karalee?
I'm a real fan. I've been eating a lot more vegetables these days. I've been thinking more about the climate and thinking more about the planet. And so I definitely love what we're doing with local producers from a protein standpoint, whether, we get a ton of eggs from our friends at Story Farms locally, and also Wishing-Bone Farms. And we work really closely with a lot of those protein producers, but I love eating vegetables and fruit. And Chef Ramon created a really broad section on our sides and also on our starters. And so I can eat, 10 or 12 different vegetable dishes in one sitting, and I love that. And it's reminiscent to me, of the vegetable plate that you get in typical meat and 3 restaurants or 7 restaurants in Charleston and in the South, and I love that.
That's just so amazing. Well, Karalee Nielsen Fallert with obviously Park and Grove, thank you for your time. And again, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks, Quinn. It's a pleasure.
Likewise.